I had clearly secretly loved my fiancée for many years. Yet when she drew lots to choose a husband, I announced my withdrawal and handed her over to the fake young master. Only because in my previous life, I argued and fought and cheated by rigging the lot to marry my fiancée. The fake young master sadly went abroad, and I thought I had one. 30 years later, I suddenly suffered heart failure, and my wife, without hesitation, donated her heart. Everyone envied me, thinking my wife and I were a model of conjugal devotion. What they didn't know was that my wife's farewell letter ran to a full 3,000 characters. 2,900 of them mourned the prematurely dead fake young master, and she had long wanted to join him. She left me only one sentence. If you know how to be grateful in the next life, whatever you do, don't marry me. My heart ached fiercely. I finally realized that the only wife I wanted didn't love me either. When I opened my eyes again, I watched my fiancée about to draw lots and tore the slips of paper to shreds. No need to make it so complicated. I'll let you and Leo have each other. All of high society knew the Johnsons had two young masters, one the true son, the other an adopted son. And my fiancée, who was betrothed to me by our parents, publicly drew lots today to choose one of these two young masters as her husband. At this moment, the words I spoke were tantamount to forfeiting the right, and everyone gathered to watch, society's elites, were all struck dumb. The champagne flutes in their hands nearly slipped. Some even splashed champagne onto their lapels in their surprise. All because they knew I was maddeningly in love with Chloe. Even though she knew that Chloe and her adopted brother Leo were already engaged, she still threw a tantrum, rolled on the ground, knelt in the rain for 3 days and nights, and begged Chloe for a chance to draw lots to pick a husband. But at this crucial moment, I actually chose to give up. How could they not be shocked? The atmosphere in the hall instantly turned strange and awkward. No one spoke a single word. Is it yielding, or is it guilt? At this, Chloe was the first to break the silence. Her voice was icy, devoid of feeling. She picked up the torn pieces of paper from the floor and fitted them together, then took out the remaining unpicked slip and showed it to everyone. Both slips are Ethan's. You're afraid your cheating will be exposed, so you forfeited out of guilt, aren't you? Her gaze was sharp as she stood opposite me, our eyes locked. Almost instantly, I realized she had been reborn too. Silent for a few seconds, I lowered my head and forced a bitter smile. Good. Saves me the trouble of explaining. Let these two lovers become a couple on their own. Leo, standing to the side, felt secretly pleased at the scene, though he pretended to be shocked. He took a few steps forward, clutching the note, as if about to weep. Brother, I know you and Chloe are betrothed by your parents, and I'm not Mom and Dad's biological child, so I'm not worthy of marrying her. Why would you cheat and disgrace the family? I won't compete with you. I announced my withdrawal. His words made me want to laugh. If he really thought that, how could there have been today's awkward drawing of straws? But Chloe believed him. She took a tissue from her bag and gently wiped his tears, her eyes full of longing and tenderness. Don't cry. The person I'm going to marry will, of course, only be you. In front of this perfect couple, I looked like a ridiculous clown. The onlookers curled their lips, looked at me with disgust, and couldn't help but sneer. When they brought Ethan back a couple of years ago, he was already timid and shrinking. Now he's cheating to steal his brother's fiancée. There's not an ounce of noble family bearing. My daughter says that Ethan always squeezes himself between people who are newlyweds. Doesn't he have any shame? Listening to everyone whisper, my father's face darkened like ink as he glared at me sharply. He said coldly that family disgrace must not be spread, then ordered the servants to escort everyone away from the scene. After everyone had left, he wore a sullen expression and called me into his study. I managed a helpless little smile. It used to be like this. Whenever he thought I had brought shame to the family, he would inevitably call me into his study to educate me. Once Leo got into an argument with a rich second-generation kid and left the other guy with a bleeding head. He immediately pinned the blame on me. No matter how I explained, my dad didn't believe me. He instead called me into the study and smashed an ashtray into my forehead, yelling that I didn't look like his biological child at all, always causing trouble and not half as sensible as Leo. But I was clearly innocent. But this time I cheated when drawing lots, simply because in my previous life I loved Chloe too much. I was painfully recalling that past life when I had just one foot into the study. Reflexively, I raised my hand to cover my head, and my father slapped my face. There was a sharp crack. I lost my balance and staggered. The next second, he kicked the back of my knee, forcing me to kneel. "Ethan, you've completely ruined my reputation. After the wedding, you're dead to Chloe. Leave the country, get far away, don't interfere with Chloe and Leo's marriage." After saying that, he flung a plane ticket in my face. The sharp edge of the ticket cut my burning cheek, making it hurt even more. He turned his head to look at the bare branches outside the window, unwilling to glance at me again. My mother, who came in behind me, as if she didn't see me kneeling on the floor, echoed my father and nodded. "You child, apart from looking like us, you're good for nothing. Go abroad and toughen up for a few years." I pressed my stinging cheek with one hand, picked up the plane ticket, and gave a bitter smile. So they had already prepared the ticket long ago. They never intended for me to stay. But in the previous life, Leo wasn't chosen. He sulked and went abroad. My parents were heartbroken and immediately gave half the company to him, fearing he'd be mistreated overseas, and they kept worrying about him. Later, when the news of Leo's death came back to the country, they went white-haired overnight and died early of grief. But now, they treat me like trash and despise me, forcing me to leave. It seems that in this life, even if I hadn't chosen to forfeit and had successfully become Chloe's betrothed, they would have wanted to get rid of me anyway. Love and lovelessness, it's really obvious. Since that's the case, in this life, I will no longer fantasize about my family's love. I'll only love myself. I swallowed the resentment in my heart and rose from the ground. I curled my lips slightly and said indifferently, "Let me go abroad, fine, but give me the property that belongs to me. I will never give up the portion of the property that is mine." At my words, my father's face instantly darkened. He thought I was hopeless. Unfilial child. Fine, you write out a letter severing parental ties with your own hand, so you won't come back later asking me for money. I'm not running a charity. He was so angry he could barely breathe. Seeing this, my mother hurried forward, repeatedly patting his chest and urging me to back down and apologize. "Ethan, from now on, everything in the house will still be split evenly between you and Leo. Why are you so angry at your father and making such a scene with us? What a generous split, 1/2 each. They're all mine. Why should I have to share them with an adopted son who stole my identity? Besides, they're saying all the right things now, but when the time comes, I doubt they'll leave me a single cent. If I were still who I was before the rebirth, I would have believed their lies. But now, not a single word they say earns my trust. Only what I actually hold in my hands belongs to me." Without a moment's hesitation, I found paper and pen and wrote a letter severing our parent-child relationship stroke by stroke, pressing my thumbprint hard and signing my name. My father didn't expect me to be so decisive. His expression grew colder. "I'll send you money again the day you leave." It seems he was afraid I'd take the money and refuse to leave. A few tears splashed onto the relationship certificate. I quickly wiped my face and was about to put the certificate on the table when his hand suddenly shot out and snatched it away. Then with another hand, he coldly pointed toward the study door. "Now, immediately, get out." Huh, he really didn't even want to look at me. I turned and strode out of the study. From inside the study, I could clearly hear him cursing at me and my mother trying to soothe him. But none of that had anything to do with me anymore. In fact, in my previous life, I had always been desperately flattering them in every way. I had no money to buy them expensive gifts, so I worked 5 or 6 jobs around the clock. Even when I was so exhausted at the construction site that I vomited blood, I couldn't bring myself to buy a single pill, let alone go to a hospital. I spent every hard-earned paycheck buying them gifts, trying to win their favor, trying to make them look at me more. but all I gave paled in comparison to how easily Leo could make them smile with a few sweet words. Thinking about it, I really felt that my past life and my pre-rebirth self had been treated unfairly. Fortunately, there's still time to fix things now. Wiping the moisture from my eyes, I quickened my steps. But unexpectedly, someone blocked my way at the end of the corridor. I slowly raised my eyes and realized it was Chloe and Leo. The two behaved very affectionately, looking like a deeply in love, picture-perfect couple. Aren't they exactly a loving couple? Pulling my gaze back, I was about to walk around them and leave. Leo stepped forward and blocked my way. He looked inquisitive and asked, "Bro, what are you holding? I just heard Dad seem to be scolding you. It's all my fault. Please, Mom and Dad, let's plead for mercy." He really kept up his usual pretense. If he truly wanted to plead for me, why wait until now? I didn't say a word, just looked at him coldly. Leo looked as if I had bullied him. Sorrow quickly darkened his face. Chloe couldn't bear to see him like that. She shot me a hard glance, then gently patted the back of his hand to comfort him. "Leo, you don't need to worry about him anymore. After all, some people are ungrateful. They only bully the weak and fear the strong. Besides, Ethan is their biological son. Uncle and Aunt certainly won't do anything to him." She turned to look at me, her tone icy. "Ethan, I exposed you in public to cut off your delusions. Forcing something won't make it sweet. Please stop clinging to me. I only have Leo in my heart. In this life, I will marry no one but Leo." As if afraid I wouldn't take it to heart, she enunciated each word with heavy emphasis. Leo gave me a smug little smile and even made a clown face at me. Ignoring his provocation, I remembered Chloe's 3,000-word will from my previous life, and my heart ached. Half a second later, I replied to her with a light laugh. I won't. From then on, I would never run after her anymore. After all, someone who has no love for me, no matter how much I scheme to win them, no matter how much I do for them, no matter how I give everything for them. In her heart, she would only be left with a deep, burning resentment toward me. Hearing my few simple words, Chloe, who had a head full of advice to give me, suddenly found it all lodged in her throat. Her face was pale, and there was a heaviness in her chest. But she couldn't say why, and could only shake her head. Maybe I was just overthinking it. Leo, beside him, rolled his eyes, and, as if they were best mates, reached out to put his hand on my shoulder. I tried to avoid it, but it was too late. His hand was already forcing itself on my shoulder. He pretended to be magnanimous and said, "All right, brother, don't say things in anger. The wedding's in a week. Until then, we'll compete fairly. However you want to compare, it's up to you." Chloe frowned, yanking Leo behind her to protect him, looking at me as if facing a great enemy. "Ethan, I'm warning you not to repeat your mistakes. No matter what tricks you pull, I will never marry you. Leo has treated you so well. If you know how to be grateful, don't fight him for her." Those words, similar to what she wrote in her suicide note, drilled into my ears and left me dazed. I understood her hint, but I know this truth far better than she does. I snorted, tightened the airplane ticket my parents had given me, and said seriously, "Chloe, I won't pester you anymore, or I'll be doomed." I swore the harshest oath, not just for her to hear, but for myself as well. Told myself not to fall for Chloe again. After all, her heart belonged only to Leo. And my parents would only keep thinking of Leo. Since that's the case, I won't want them anymore. This time, I didn't continue to entangle myself with them. Leaving Chloe and Leo with shocked faces, I returned to my little room. The room faces north year-round, without windows. Only a small night light on the desk glows faintly, illuminating the watch under a glass dust cover. Looking at that watch, memories surged in like a tide. 5 years ago, I was 18, and at Leo's lavish promotion banquet, I was a server pouring tea and fetching drinks. I accidentally bumped into Chloe and spilled a bowl of soup all over her, but she excitedly brought me before Mr. and Mrs. Johnson. That's when I learned my adoptive mother had, in order to ensure her biological son lived in luxury, secretly swapped us when my mother gave birth to me. Probably out of resentment toward the rich, She had beaten and scolded me since childhood, forcing me to drop out of middle school and work to support her. And I did all the household chores. After coming back from my day job every day, I still had to wash her clothes and cook for her. If the meals didn't suit her, she would beat me again. The day my biological parents took me back, I thought my life would finally get better. I also knew that my foster mother's mistakes shouldn't be allowed to drag Leo down. So when I first returned home, I naively thought about getting along with him peacefully, but everyone treated me like air. Even if I wanted a glass of water, only if Leo spoke would the servants comply. I quickly saw the situation clearly, stopped hoping for anything, and lived cautiously and meekly. A year later, on the day Leo and I turned 19, we held a grand banquet. Everyone only treated Leo as the young master, prepared only one gift, and chatted and joked with him. When I felt down, Chloe noticed me standing in the corner, warmly called me over, and handed me a small gift box. She smiled with crescent eyes and said, "Happy 19th birthday to our Ethan. Wishing you happiness and joy for the rest of your life, and smooth sailing all the way." In that instant, she was like an angel, and I was instantly captivated. A thought flashed through my mind. Chloe and I were betrothed since childhood. She should be my fiancée, and my obsession grew like vines, wildly taking root. I almost went mad as I began to fight Leo for her. Chloe's tacit consent, indulgence, occasional concern, and gifts made me mistakenly believe she felt the same for me. But after marrying Chloe, she never smiled at me again. I thought she felt guilty over Leo's departure, so I dutifully washed her clothes and cooked, shielded her from drinking at social events until I had a bleeding stomach, and cared for her in every possible way. She remained as serene as a chrysanthemum. I thought love was meant to be a slow, steady flow. Even when she said she didn't want children, I assumed she was afraid of the pain. So I mindlessly supported her and willingly agreed to be child-free with her. It wasn't until 30 years later, when I woke from surgery and learned that Chloe had donated her heart to me and saw the will she wrote, that I found out. Someone so aloof could also have such passionate, surging feelings and could speak sweet words. Only, all of that had been given to Leo. She did not want to have children. She just didn't want to have them with me. She wouldn't even leave her ashes to me, saying she didn't want to be buried with me and insisting on a sea burial so the ashes could drift with the currents to foreign lands and accompany Leo. Fresh from surgery, overwhelmed with grief, I had a rejection reaction and vomited blood on the spot, dying immediately. I finally understood that no matter how hard I fought, someone who doesn't love me simply doesn't love me. The only wife I ever wanted never loved me either. I lowered my eyes and turned off the night light. I took the watch out from its dust-proof glass cover. I didn't even look at it again and threw it straight into the trash can. I thought the watch would, from then on, disappear completely from my world. But to my surprise, at dinner the Samoyed Leo keeps came over with a watch in its mouth, looking like it wanted play. At the table, I tightened my chopsticks, knowing Leo was about to cause trouble again. Sure enough, he looked annoyed, snatched the watch from the dog's mouth, and patted the dog's head. "This isn't my brother's precious watch. Lucky, how dare you treat it like a toy? My brother will skin you alive." From his description, anyone who didn't know better would think I'm tyrannical and vicious, not even sparing a dog. He was still putting on an act, scolding the dog. "A freebie. My brother wore this for many years. Don't you know how important it is? You're really going to get me killed." Saying that, he handed the saliva-covered watch up to me, his face earnest. "Brother, I'm sorry. Put it on quickly." The dog's drool slid off the watch and fell in my rice bowl. My parents, who were eating, knew this watch was my inviolable item and never touched it. For the first time ever they urged, "Ethan, Leo didn't do it on purpose. Don't make a fuss." I simply stared blankly at Chloe. So it was only a freebie? Chloe, sitting beside Leo, avoided my gaze and never looked me in the eye. She picked up a bite of food for Leo with her chopsticks and said softly, "That's not a freebie. This is an authentic item the clerk threw in when you bought the Patek Philippe. Retail price is still a few thousand US dollars. Listening to her defend it, I could only smile bitterly at myself. So it turned out she hadn't specially bought me a gift. She just handed me the freebie. Ridiculous that I was overjoyed, thinking someone still cared about me. How can a Patek Philippe worth millions of dollars be spoken of in the same breath as a watch costing only a few thousand? I suppose, in Chloe and Leo's eyes, the pursuits of my past life were nothing but a sentimental clown's performance. I put down the chopsticks, reached out my hand, and took the watch. Chloe thought the matter was settled, a faint smile lifting the corner of her mouth. Ethan, it's the thought that counts. I'll give you the latest model later. Before she finished speaking, right in front of her, I stood up and, with a backhand, threw the watch out. The Samoyed at Leo's feet dashed out like an arrow released from a bow and fetched the watch back. It wagged its tail and came up to me, looking for me to play with it. I patted the dog's head and said calmly, "Leo is right. It's just a freebie. This kind of cheap thing is only fit to be a toy for dogs." Chloe looked at my composed expression in disbelief. For some reason, her chest tightened and her face suddenly turned sullen. Seeing that I didn't lose my temper, Leo's mind raced. His eyes instantly reddened as he said aggrievedly, "Brother, you said you wouldn't get angry, but you deliberately broke the watch. If it doesn't work, hit me to vent." He said this, ran in front of me, tried to grab my hand, and hit himself. Chloe was first to take his hand, her eyes full of pity. "Leo, it's not your fault. Go back and sit down and eat first." When she looked at me, a trace of deep thought passed through her eyes. Suddenly, as if she had thought of something, she actually let out a sigh of relief and said with conviction, "That's enough, Ethan. Why play hard to get? No matter how much you try to make a point against Leo, the groom, the wedding's lead won't be you." She pulled Leo back and sat him down in his original seat. Leo glanced back at me with eyes red all around. Just from that one look, my dad felt I was being unreasonably stubborn. He slapped the table and shouted angrily, "Ethan, if you don't want to eat, then don't. Such pettiness is unbecoming. Go to the detention room to reflect." After saying that, he called over a few bodyguards, and I was alone. Even though I couldn't match 4 hands, I was quickly subdued by the guards and dragged into the detention room like a dead dog. As they left, someone delivered a heavy kick to me. "Who do you think you are, daring to compete with the young master? Don't you know what kind of nobody you are? Even if you're the eldest young master, you have no standing in this household. If I were you, I'd have packed up and left ages ago, so as not to be a nuisance." The cell door was shut, and the whole world instantly plunged into endless darkness and silence. Luckily, I had slept in rooms like this since the time I was little, so I didn't have claustrophobia. But in the dark, I still lost all sense of time. I didn't know how long had passed, or whether it had been days. I only knew I was hungry and thirsty. I longed for someone to bring me some food, or even a single sip of water. But I knew perfectly well that no one would come to bring me any of that. I curled up on the ground, my eyes unfocused as I stared in some direction. I wondered whether this time they would let me starve to death. At that thought, my mind snapped awake. I shouldn't sit and wait to die. I should go kick the door open. But my body, starved for days, had almost no strength to exert. Just as my mind was drifting again, suddenly the door opened and someone flashed a bright flashlight in my eyes. My eyes ached from the glare, and I instinctively shielded them with my hand. Before my eyes could adjust to the bright light, I heard a familiar, deep male voice. "Blood is always best. No matter how much I instigate, it's only to stop them from having a meal, a little scuffle, just a token gesture." His tone was full of jealousy, tinged with gnashing teeth. When he realized it was Leo, I let out a weary sigh. "You're wrong. Mom and Dad only see you as their son. They've already decided to send me abroad after the wedding. You don't need to pick on me. From now on, I'll never compete with you for Chloe again. After all, right now I really don't want to be entangled with them any longer." During the days I was confined, I thought a lot about the events of my past life and about what had happened since I was reborn. I truly felt it was unnecessary. If you can't win back family affection and love, you might as well just love yourself properly. Leo clearly froze for a moment, even pausing the hand that was waving the flashlight. He asked in surprise. Really? I nodded, my voice hoarse as I said. If you don't believe me, you can search the drawers in my room. There's the plane ticket my parents booked for me. There was a second of silence. Then Leo turned off the flashlight. Darkness closed in around me again. Only the place where he stood had light. I forced myself up using the wall, trying to move in that direction, trying to get out for a sip of water. Leo's voice sounded again. This time he sneered. Ethan, you think you can fool me again? Before I thought you were passive and uncompetitive, but you suddenly started competing with me for Chloe. Do you expect me to believe you'd give her up? Compared to waiting for you to give in? I believe more in the words man can conquer nature. Ridiculous, I thought after I said that he would stop, but I didn't expect he had no intention of letting me go. While I was stunned, he strode up to me, grabbed my wrist hard, and violently dragged my unsteady self out of the little dark room. I had no strength to resist and was forced to be dragged to the stairway. Looking at the deserted staircase, a bad feeling swept through me. I suddenly widened my eyes and asked, "What are you going to do?" The next second, he gave me a mysterious smile. "Guess how horribly you're going to die?" I instinctively shrugged his hand off, but watched in horror as he deliberately twisted his foot and then tumbled head over heels down the stairs. When he fell to the first floor, he also knocked over an expensive vase at the bottom of the staircase. The loud crash of shattering and the screams instantly echoed through the entire villa. For a moment, everyone was jolted awake from their sleep. Then, countless lights switched on, as bright as daylight. Chloe came out of the bedroom and saw Leo collapsed on the floor. Her pupils contracted and she rushed over. "Now, I'm taking you to the hospital." In my previous life, I was in a car accident trying to save her, lying in a pool of blood, and she never showed such a terrified expression. Leo, knowing he was fine, clutched Chloe's clothes and sobbed. "I can't go. He'll be arrested." "Don't blame him. It was my fault for going to look at my groom's suit. If I hadn't, I wouldn't have found him sneaking off to cut up my clothes, and he wouldn't have accidentally pushed me." The next second, he looked up at me, his eyes full of malice. "Brother, I know you're angry about the watch, but I've already apologized. The wedding is coming up. What am I supposed to do without a groom's suit?" He spoke as if it had truly happened. No one present doubted him. I stood at the top of the stairs, one hand on the banister, watching the scene with a cold gaze. Just then, a servant hurried up to Chloe. Her face was ashen as she said, "Young madam, the young master's suit really was cut to pieces." After the servant finished speaking, he held the suit up in front of everyone. What had once been a high-end luxury suit now hung there like a bunch of tattered strips of cloth. I hadn't expected Leo would go so far as to frame me like this. It really was a perfectly tight conspiracy, leaving no flaw to be found. My gaze instinctively shifted to Chloe, and I saw that she had just looked up at me. Her vermilion lips were pressed together in a thin line. The beautiful eyes held disappointment and shock, causing my heart to tremble. I gripped the railing tighter without realizing it, only because I knew better than anyone that once her mild-mannered nature truly turned to anger, her methods were harsher than anyone else's. Chloe's voice was icy. "Ethan, aren't you going to come down and apologize to Leo and admit you were wrong?" I still stood without moving, just continuing to stare at her. Chloe's face darkened to the point of dripping, and she immediately ordered her bodyguards. "Take him down here for me." I turned to leave, but found that in this house I had nowhere to go, and to get out the front door I would have to pass through the first floor. In the end, I gave up struggling and let the bodyguards drag me down the stairs. My calves were bruised and mottled as a result. It wasn't until they dragged me to the first floor that I finally remembered something. I raised my hand and pointed at the red light in the stairwell. "I didn't do these things. You can check the surveillance." "How dare you? Are you saying Leo framed you?" Upstairs, my parents came out at the noise, both wearing faces full of anger. Chloe frowned slightly and whispered in my ear, "Ethan, you caused Leo's death in your past life, and in this life you're going to harm him again. Don't you have even the slightest pang of conscience? If you apologize now, I'll be willing to put in a good word for you." Her words struck me like a thunderclap beside my ear, and I scrambled to defend myself. I didn't. He squandered money abroad, acted arrogantly and tyrannically, angered the locals, and was beaten to death. Before she finished she thought I was deliberately smearing Leo and couldn't stand it, so she slapped me. "Ethan, even if you're bullying Leo, there has to be a limit. He is the future son-in-law of my Taylor family. Don't even think about touching a single hair on him, not you, nor anyone. You must apologize to him properly right now. Otherwise, don't blame me for being heartless." She spoke each word coldly and mercilessly. At that moment, my heart completely turned cold. No wonder. Last life Chloe had already accepted me and even brought up how to spend our anniversary. But once it became known that Leo had died in a foreign land, our relationship took a sharp turn for the worse. At home, she would rather be mute and deaf than respond to me. It turned out that in her heart, I was a person consumed by jealousy, a villain who had hunted down and killed her adopted brother. I thought I had completely given up and had no expectations of her. But at that moment, a wave of grievance suddenly welled up in my chest. I looked around, hoping someone would speak up for me, but as far as I could see, everyone was staring at me with looks of angry condemnation. They would rather believe Leo's single-sided words than bother to check the surveillance. How utterly ridiculous. After a long moment, I found my voice again and said hoarsely, "Yes, it's my fault. Are you satisfied?" I didn't want to say another word to them. Isn't that the answer they wanted from me? Fine, I'll give it to them. My father snorted coldly. "Put Ethan in solitary. Lock him up with 8 locks. Don't let anyone give him food. If anyone lets him out, they're fired on the spot." When the bodyguard dragged her away, I heard Leo deliberately speak loudly. "Chloe, you are usually gentle as water, giving some people expectations they shouldn't have. Now that you've flown into a rage for me, he'll surely be heartbroken, right?" Chloe was silent for a moment, then said coldly, "He's rubbing salt in the wound. He doesn't deserve my kindness." I let out a self-mocking laugh. In my previous life, everyone envied me, saying I had married a gentle and virtuous good wife. But they didn't know. She was good to everyone except me. When a neighbor's child was eating alone at home and burned his mouth, she immediately took the child to the hospital. But when I was scalded on the calf by hot oil while frying the chicken wings she loved, she didn't even glance at me, thinking I was pretending to be delicate. But it was clearly half a pot of boiling oil. A layer of skin was burned off my calf on the spot, and blood poured down my leg like crazy. Later, because I didn't get timely treatment, a large scar was left on my leg, and the bone was injured, which caused me to become crippled again. I lived the rest of my life with that scar and limping leg, until the moment I coughed up blood and died. Thinking of those past events, my heart ached in spasms. It was because I wasn't worth it. Luckily, such things will no longer happen in this world. After that, I was locked back in a confinement cell. I don't know how much time passed. Images flashed through my mind like a revolving lantern. As I neared death, the cell door was opened and someone kicked me, like I was mud. "Tomorrow is the wedding. Leo is afraid you'll cause trouble. You troublemaker, leave now." In the dim light, I couldn't make out who had come. I could only tell from his voice that it was my father. My fingertips trembled slightly, so I'd been locked up for a full 5 days. I reached out to grab his trouser leg, wanting him to give me some water first. But before my hand could grab his pant leg, my father picked me up and shoved a suitcase into my arms. He snorted coldly. "Cut the act. You're the eldest young master. Who would really mistreat you? The money's already been wired." As I was pushed out of the villa like a dead dog, I caught a glimpse of the clock in the living room out of the corner of my eye. 2 in the morning, utterly deserted. In the courtyard, there was nothing left except me, a piece of luggage, a car, and a driver. It was as if on the day I arrived, they were afraid Leo would get upset and didn't dare make a big fuss to welcome me, only having Chloe quietly bring me home to be acknowledged as family. The car started and headed for the airport. I asked the driver for a bag of biscuits and a bottle of mineral water. After finishing the bottle of water, I couldn't wait to tear open the bag of biscuits and ate them ravenously. But unexpectedly, the car made a sudden hard brake. The seatbelt tightened across my chest. I choked and pounded my chest, my mouth full of the metallic taste of blood. I looked up, and in the bright beams of the headlights ahead, a tall, familiar figure appeared. The driver saw it was Chloe and said nervously, "Young madam, what are you doing here?" Chloe ignored him, her long fingers tightening on her trench coat. She walked quickly to the back seat and tapped on my car window. I was startled for a moment and had no desire to have any further contact with her. Perhaps she had been waiting a while. She knocked on the car window again. I had no choice but to roll the window down and looked at her coolly. In the dim car, Chloe didn't notice my gaze. She only saw how gaunt I had become. She frowned and reached out to wipe the crumbs from the corner of my mouth. "How did you make yourself look so pathetic?" "I heard a noise just now. Leo said you can't stand hardship and sneaked out to have a big meal. Don't worry, I won't expose you. Come back early. Just don't cause any trouble at the wedding." Her tone was calm, the same way she spoke to me on my 19th birthday when she spotted me alone in a corner. I nodded reflexively. Seeing me looking so sensible, Chloe thought for a moment and reached into her pocket. She pulled out a watch and handed it to me, whispering, "I won't register marriage with Leo. It's just for show. I'll persuade him properly to find a good wife. At most give me 3 months and I'll come back." Looking at the Patek Philippe in front of me worth $1 million, I wondered if I had developed hallucinations for being confined too long. Before I could reach out to take the watch, Chloe grew a bit impatient and shoved it into my hand. My fingers were ice cold. When she accidentally touched them, she couldn't help shivering and instinctively pulled her hand back. She frowned slightly. "Why are you so cold? Even if you're going to a big dinner, remember to wear a thicker coat. Whatever, the earlier you leave, the earlier you return." She finished speaking to herself, then lowered her eyes and looked at me. "Ethan, as long as you swear not to fight Leo for things and to always treat him kindly from now on, I am willing to be with you and help you atone for the sins of your past life. That's my only demand. Compared to what you did to him, it's not excessive, right?" Chloe's irises were very light, making her seem compassionate toward the world. She said so many things, and I finally understood what she meant. I almost laughed. I'm monstrously guilty in her heart. She is indecisive, wanting to have it both ways. But where in the world is there perfection? My eyes stung as if about to cry. I shook my head. "Don't worry, I won't fight with him. Not only will I stop competing, I'll forever avoid you all." Before I finished speaking, Chloe assumed I had agreed. She smiled, her eyes curved into crescents. "Ethan, you've been locked up for a few days. You've been much better behaved, so it's settled." After saying that, she waved at me. "All right, let's go have a big meal. I'm going back to catch up on sleep." The car started again, and in the rearview mirror, Chloe's slender figure disappeared completely. I had no attachment at all. I threw the Patek Philippe out of the car. "Chloe, from now on, the two shores separate us, and we will never see each other again. Mom, Dad, this is the last time I will call you. After this, I will have no parents, only myself." The next morning, the wedding proceeded as scheduled. The seats were full of guests, and someone else was sitting in the seat that should have been mine. In the dressing room, Chloe checked the time, grew anxious, and called me. "The number you have dialed is switched off." A cold female voice sounded. Just then Leo strode in and, smiling, asked, "My bride, are you ready to go on stage?" Chloe was somewhat distracted. "Why hasn't Ethan come back yet? The wedding is almost starting." Leo looked smug and immediately started throwing dirt on me. "Sigh, maybe my brother looks down on me and doesn't want to attend our wedding. If he doesn't come, let him be." But Chloe did not give the expected compromise. Instead, her brows knit slightly. "Impossible. I already arranged it with him." As if remembering something, she suddenly stood up, lifting her skirt, and walked out of the dressing room. Leo's eyes were full of unwillingness. He followed behind her and called, "Chloe." Chloe seemed not to have heard, only feeling a tightness in her chest and a trace of unease. In the end, she found my parents in the corner of the hall. She had barely seen the two of them when she couldn't help but blurt out, "Uncle, Aunt, Ethan is missing. Please send someone to look for him and contact the driver." My mother saw the panic on her face, frowned, then quickly smiled and waved her hand. "Don't worry about him." My dad, however, looked thoroughly disgusted. "Ethan, that good-for-nothing bastard. I threw him out of the country last night so he wouldn't come and wreck your and Leo's wedding and make me lose face." Before he finished, the assistant stormed in, pale-faced. "Chairman, bad news. The young master's flight has had an air disaster. The entire plane went down." The assistant's words were like a landmine suddenly detonating, flattening every sound around. "What did you say?" Chloe's face went deathly pale. For a moment she felt deaf, and she asked aloud. At that moment, the three people in the corner all fixed their gaze on the assistant, who nervously wiped the thin sweat from his brow. Swallowing hard, he repeated once more. "The plane Master Ethan took last night crashed into international waters at 8 this morning. The airline has just confirmed it was that plane and sent a notice. All 371 people on board were killed. None survived." After finishing, he didn't dare make another sound, almost holding his breath. When my mother heard this, she nearly fainted and was only caught in time by my father's quick hands and eyes. My father, who has weathered many storms over the years and remained fairly calm, hurriedly called me. Only a cold female voice came from the phone. "The number you have dialed is turned off. Please try again later." He redialed several more times, but the result was the same. At that moment, his heart suddenly dropped. He hurriedly called the driver who had taken me to the airport, and at the same time tried to reassure my mother. "Don't worry, maybe he didn't even get on that flight." In his mind, I always like stirring up trouble. How could I possibly have obediently boarded the plane? Thinking that, he felt a little calmer. The driver didn't answer immediately. Each second waiting for the call stretched out endlessly. Just as my dad was getting a bit impatient, the driver finally picked up and asked, "Mr. Johnson, what's wrong?" My mom was nearly in tears, snatched the phone, and asked in a trembling voice, "Ethan, he didn't go to the airport. He didn't go, right?" The driver didn't know about the plane crash. He still thought they were there to assign blame. He immediately patted his chest and said emphatically, "Mr. Johnson, madam, I guarantee it. I watched the young master get on the plane with my own eyes. He hesitated a bit at first, but after I persuaded him, he obediently boarded. I absolutely would not interfere with the young mistress and the little master's marriage." He still thought he had done the right thing and was trying to take credit. Unbeknownst to them, on the other side of the screen, the three people's faces changed. At that, my mother's vision went black. The phone slipped from her trembling hand and hit the floor with a thud. But the guests around them were still lost in the joy of the wedding and did not notice what was happening in the corner. Seeing my mother about to fall, my father immediately reached out to steady her, and she put all her weight into him. Chloe, however, stood frozen in place, dazed and unable to come to her senses for a long time. On the phone, the driver was still speaking triumphantly. Finally, the assistant grabbed the phone and told the other person to shut up, and only then did they cautiously hang up. In the dressing room, after Chloe had driven Leo back, he waited for quite a while and saw that Chloe still hadn't returned. He gritted his teeth and ran out of the dressing room, searching for him. Before he reached the corner, he could already feel the atmosphere was extremely oppressive. Could it be that something happened to Ethan? Thinking of that possibility, he inexplicably grew excited. But in just a few seconds, he returned to normal. He hurried forward, came up to the group, took Chloe's arm with one hand, and acted coy. "What's wrong, Chloe? My brother is definitely fine. He's probably sulking and deliberately trying to make you all worry." He thought that as soon as he said this, everyone's attention would shift back to him. But Chloe didn't speak. He found it odd and turned to look at his parents. "Dad, Mom, why do you both look so pale?" Before they could answer, Chloe finally moved and took Leo's hand out from the crook of her arm. She ripped the veil off her head with one hand and ran out of the hotel. She hadn't even reached the hotel gate when Leo realized and hurried after her, grabbing her by the arm to force her to stop. He was unusually serious. "Where are you going?" The The wedding is about to start. The guests are all seated. Chloe's expression was eerily calm. Looking closely at her eyes, he noticed her pupils weren't focusing. No, I can't hold the wedding with you. It's precisely because of this wedding that Ethan. Behind Leo, my parents hurriedly caught up and explained to him. Your brother's flight had an accident. Flight? An accident? Leo was stunned for a moment, almost unable to stop the corner of his mouth from rising. He really had guessed correctly. He hadn't expected that I truly had an accident. Afraid he couldn't contain the joy in his heart, he quickly pinched his own thigh again, forcing out 2 tears. Brother had an accident, so the wedding definitely can't go on. Don't worry, Mom and Dad. Even if people ridicule me, it's okay. Finding my brother as soon as possible is the most important thing. His tactic of taking a step back to advance the situation shifted my parents' focus. My father said solemnly, Chloe, Ethan's accident has nothing to do with you. You don't have to call off the engagement out of guilt. Finish the wedding first, and then we can talk about this, okay? My mother looked at my father with a hurt expression, feeling it was wrong to talk about this under the circumstances, but after thinking it over, she realized he wasn't wrong. Besides, she had seen tears at the corner of Leo's eye and immediately joined in persuading me. Yes, Chloe, it's good that Ethan has us there. Don't let it delay your marriage to Leo. Looking at the 2 people in front of her who kept talking about the wedding, Chloe stared in disbelief and cried out, Are you crazy? Isn't Ethan your own son? He's in an accident, and you're still thinking about some damn wedding? Only then did she suddenly realize something. She once thought that my parents spoiled me without limits, which made me arrogant and bully my foster brother. Perhaps that was just her own assumption. She also remembered that once I had a high fever and lay in bed unable to move. I was parched and wanted someone to hand me a glass of water, and she happened to pass by my bedroom door, so I begged her. And she happened to see my parents coming through the gate carrying a lot of luxury goods. She assumed those were all things my parents had bought to coax me while I was sick. So at the time, she pretended not to hear me say I wanted water and turn away. Now that I think about it, she never seemed to see any of those luxury items on me. Instead, they appeared on Leo all the time. It's probably more than that. The dishes on the Johnsons' dining table always seemed to be the ones Leo, and Mr. and Mrs. Johnson liked. As for what I like to eat, she doesn't know. The Johnson family probably doesn't really know either. It turned out that, in this household, I was the least favored one. At the thought of this, her tears instantly burst forth. Now she could no longer remain calm. Shrugging off Leo's hand, she prepared to rush for the front door. But my parents blocked her path too. Chloe, if you leave like this, how will Leo live his life from now on? We know Ethan had an accident. You're upset and probably afraid of bad luck, but don't worry. We'll take care of this matter. At those words, the blood in Chloe's veins went ice cold. She sneered. You think I'm afraid I'll jinx things? But why don't you consider this? Since he came back, have you really focused your attention on him? Do you know what Ethan likes to eat? What he doesn't like? What he's allergic to? What his hobbies are? You probably don't know any of that. Not only did they not know, she didn't know either. Even though in the previous life she was married to me for 30 years, she never knew these things. Anyway, at the dining table every time, it was always what she loved to eat. Thinking of everything that had happened, her tears once again spilled uncontrollably. My parents were completely stunned in place, unable to react for a moment. This time, Chloe didn't hesitate any longer. She threaded past the 2 of them and hurried out the front door. Behind her, Leo's anxious voice was calling her name, and the guests who had belatedly noticed something wrong with the wedding were making a commotion, but she seemed not to hear any of it. Once in the car, she called her secretary and asked them to find out the exact location of the plane crash. She wanted to confirm it herself. Even though the news said there were no survivors, she clung to a final sliver of hope, wishing for a miracle, hoping that I still had a chance to survive. Even if it were only a sliver, she would be willing to repay it with half of her own life. Only now did she clearly realize that, during our days together in my previous life, she had long been deeply in love with me. But after being reborn, She was blinded and believed she still loved Leo. Chloe pressed the accelerator harder. Through tear-blurred eyes, she choked out, "Ethan, please live so that I have a chance to make it up to you." The secretary called quickly. She put one hand to the receiver, and before the secretary could speak, she asked in a trembling voice, "Where did the plane crash?" After the secretary read out a set of coordinates, the hand she had on the steering wheel trembled reflexively. The next second, the car slammed hard into the roadside flower bed. The windshield shattered into pieces in an instant. The airbag deployed, yet she still had a gash at her temple and was splattered with bits of glass. Blood mixed with tears and blurred her eyes, but she just sat dumbfounded in the driver's seat, her mind replaying the secretary's words. The plane crash occurred in the middle of the high seas. If there are no passing ships on the high seas, even if someone parachuted down, they might not survive. No, it's impossible. She still couldn't give up hope. She wouldn't believe it unless she saw my corpse with her own eyes. Thinking this, Chloe pulled herself together again. She drove the old car to the pier as fast as she could, then boarded the cruise ticket the secretary had bought for her. At the ticket checkpoint, even when someone pointed out the wound on her forehead, she acted as if she hadn't heard and focused only on heading out to the open sea. The plane crash had already been broadcast worldwide by the news. Most of the people taking this cruise were relatives of the victims. The ticket inspector said nothing more, only offered Chloe a word of condolence, then let her board. Soon, the cruise set sail, heading toward the open sea. Wedding venue. Because of the bride's sudden departure, the guests in the grand hall were all talking excitedly. Leo, standing in the doorway, had his hands at his sides clenched tightly into fists. He had been looking forward to today for so long. For that, he even spent over half a year working out at the gym, all to give Chloe the most unforgettable wedding night. He never expected that, because of me, all his hopes would be shattered. The moment he heard the news of my death, he was truly happy. From then on, he would have not only Chloe's love, but my parents' favor all to himself, and all the family assets would belong to him. Everything was obviously headed in a good direction. So why did a dead person have to come back and argue with him? He couldn't make sense of any of it. He only hoped I would be dead and in pieces. He gritted his teeth over these thoughts in silence. For the sake of face, my father put on a forced smile and told the guests that because the bride was unwell, today's wedding would probably have to be postponed. Only he thought that by not mentioning me, no one would know that the Johnson family's young master had passed away. His words were immediately proven wrong by a guest. That guest happened to see a news notification and discovered the plane crash. He also remembered that when he had just come in from outside, he had vaguely heard the conversation in the corner. He immediately retorted, "Mr. Johnson, could it be that the eldest son was forcibly taken away by you, and then something happened to him?" My father's face immediately darkened. He wanted to scold him, but realized the other family status was higher than the Johnsons. He stood rooted to the spot for a moment, unable to think of any good way to defend himself. But the other guests had already heard that guest's words, and the voices of discussion grew louder. My mom saw the scene was getting somewhat out of control and grabbed my dad's arm, shaking it. After my dad calmed down and was about to speak again, Leo spoke up first. "Yes, to be honest with everyone, my brother did have an accident. But it was absolutely not my father forcing him to leave. He said he couldn't stand seeing Chloe and me get married today, ignored our repeated pleas, and left in the middle of the night. Now that the deceased is gone, I hope everyone will stop discussing this matter so my brother's spirit can rest in peace. As for today's wedding, we Johnsons admit we did not entertain everyone properly. The gift money you've given can be reclaimed to the front desk shortly. Here, on behalf of the Johnson family, I offer everyone our deepest apologies." After he finished speaking, he bent at the waist and made a bow. With that speech, he shifted all the blame onto me. The guests already disliked me as the real young master, and upon hearing this, one by one they began to offer comfort. My father had been in a bad mood, but seeing the guests' attitudes change, he cast a satisfied look at Leo. At this moment, he silently felt relieved that the one who had the accident wasn't that son. Otherwise, his company would truly have no successor. Although my mother was distressed by the news of my death, she didn't want to see Leo, this son, get hurt. She felt a twinge of guilt toward Leo. 10 minutes later, the guests were sent off one by one. The wedding venue fell completely silent. My father put my mother and Leo into the car. They drove straight home. It wasn't until they stepped through the front door that my mother, in a daze, seemed to catch sight of me, carefully carrying a fruit platter out of the kitchen and asking if they wanted any. She also seemed to see me appear on the other side of the sofa, pulling out lots of little trinkets or various herbs from a suitcase, presenting them to them like treasures and saying they were gifts. My mother's body involuntarily trembled. He was still caught in time by my dad. "Are you thinking about Ethan again?" My mom stared blankly at my dad, opened her mouth as if to say something, but in the end, no words came out. The next second, she slid away from my dad, ran upstairs at lightning speed, and started rifling through the gifts I had once given her in her room. But no matter how she rummaged, she couldn't find any of the things I had given her. She ran to another room to look. My father watched this scene, frowned deeply, and asked in puzzlement, "What exactly are you looking for?" Let the household servants search. Don't lose Mrs. Johnson's composure. My mother, rummaging through the wardrobe, suddenly froze. She stopped what she was doing and looked up at my father, angry. "To you, is nobody important except your pride? Do you even know how many gifts Ethan brought us? We never properly cherished them. Where on earth did I put his gifts?" She said this, then went to crawl under the bed to search again. My dad stood frozen in place. Leo, standing outside the bedroom door, had a dark look in his eyes. After a long moment, he muttered, "Mom, those things brother sent, you told the servants to throw them all away back then." My mom, who was just about to crawl under the bed, paused. Afterward, her sealed memories seemed to be torn open by time. She remembered that the plate of fruit I cut back then, they didn't eat any of it. They even scolded me for not behaving like a proper young master, saying that even if I returned, I'd brought back nothing but bad habits. And the little trinkets I gave them, or those medicinal herbs, they scorned them as unsuitable, and in front of me had the servants throw everything straight into the trash at the gate. Yes, they hadn't kept a single gift I gave them, but my mother still couldn't let it go and muttered to herself, "Then there must be a family portrait, right?" She comforted herself by taking out the photo album. When she opened it, the Johnson family was all there, including Chloe, but I was the only one missing. At that moment, my mother could no longer hold back the sorrow rising in her chest and broke into loud sobs. My father's eyes inexplicably reddened as well. He took out his phone and called Chloe. There was still no answer from Chloe. He then called the assistant to ask if my body had been found. The assistant replied, tremblingly, "Mr. Johnson, the maritime police have been searching, but they haven't even found the wreckage of the plane." My dad breathed a little easier. "Doesn't that prove Ethan is still alive?" The assistant spoke frankly. "The news has confirmed that the flight on that route had an accident. The plane crashed with no survivors." Even though my father's phone didn't have speakerphone on, my mother could still clearly hear the assistant's voice from inside. Upon hearing this, she could no longer bear the enormous shock within her. Her vision went black, and she completely fainted. My father immediately put down the phone and went to support her, pinching and shouting at her philtrum to rouse her. But my mother never responded at all. As for Leo, when he heard the plane had indeed had an accident, he couldn't help but curl his lips. However, when he saw my mother unconscious, he immediately pretended to be concerned and rushed in, joining my father in calling out to her. They shouted for more than 10 minutes to no avail before Leo took out his phone and called the hospital. On the other side, the cruise ship didn't go directly to the high seas where the plane went down. It stopped after reaching the vicinity. The victims' families were originally not allowed to come out onto the high seas, but the Coast Guard had been searching at sea for nearly 20 hours and still couldn't find a single body, not even any wreckage from the plane. It wasn't that they hadn't held on to hope, but the satellite positioning did indeed show the plane had gone down into the high seas. That's why the news was released. Of course, they had been conducting search and rescue at sea since last night, and had never given up. By the cruise ship railing, staring at the boundless sea horizon, everyone clasped their hands together and prayed silently. Chloe was included. In her heart, she sincerely prayed, hoping that I hadn't been harmed. In her mind, she thought that since both she and I could be reborn, that meant we were blessed people and couldn't possibly die so easily. However, a week passed, and the search and rescue operation was still ongoing, and no trace of the plane's wreckage could be found. A month passed, and the plane wreckage still hadn't been found. 6 months passed, and there was still no discovery. The search and rescue team still refused to give up. Until a year later, when a country found a piece of an airplane's wing wreckage on a small island. At that moment, the date of the plane's accident was designated as the XX Aviation Memorial Day. Over the past year or so, Chloe hasn't been doing well. She's become much thinner, crying almost every day, nearly collapsing, and only manages to hold on a little whenever she thinks of me. She bought a very large plot for me in the cemetery, on which is engraved Chloe's husband Ethan's grave. My mother's mental state is also not good. She often has hallucinations and believes I'm still at home. My father was so upset seeing her like that he had Leo take her out traveling. My mother originally didn't want to go, but Leo still took her out on a trip. Only she was physically away, but her heart was still thinking of me. As for Leo, after the dream of the wedding shattered, his relationship with Chloe once dropped to zero. No matter how he tried to win her over, whether by acting coy or by crying, Chloe remained unmoved. Leo was so angry that he cursed me once every day in his heart. He cursed that I could never be reborn, and if I were, I'd be reborn as an animal. Meanwhile, a year earlier, after going abroad, I had no idea that back home a huge uproar had already been stirred up over the plane incident. I landed directly in Northern Europe, breathing the slightly cool, fresh air. At the airport back home, I wanted to change my ticket to go somewhere my parents couldn't find me, then live there peacefully by myself. At that time, I happened to meet a passenger who looked anxious and wanted to go to Houston. His destination was Northern Europe. We hit it off immediately and just swapped plane tickets. When boarding, they check whether you're wearing the same clothes as at security, so we even changed outfits on purpose. I don't know how that person is doing now. The money my parents deposited into my account is enough for me to live carefree for the rest of my life. In my previous life, to shorten the distance with Chloe, I took the adult college entrance exam, went all the way to a doctorate, and my English became very good. Enough to get me through life here. I told myself I was giving myself a vacation. After renting a place, I took out my phone and a message popped up. The flight from Jing City to Houston has crashed. There are no survivors on board. I froze in place, and suddenly a chill shot from my feet up to the crown of my head. Only when I looked closely did I realize it was true. It suddenly occurred to me that in my last life at this time, I was holding a wedding with Chloe, my heart full of sweetness, and naturally not paying attention to such ominous news. Later, Leo insisted on going abroad, and my parents tried hard to stop him. It must have been because news of a plane crash had circulated recently. Thinking of the person who died in my place after swapping plane tickets with me, a wave of sorrow washed over me. I immediately hired a private investigator abroad, and only after obtaining information about him did I learn that Northern Europe was his home and that he had originally planned to go to Houston to see his lover. I quietly transferred a handsome sum to his family and his lover to express my sentiments. In the blink of an eye, a month passed, maybe because I rarely went out and almost always stayed cooped up at home. That day, my neighbor said I was too reclusive and wanted to take me to a social event held by a nearby university. The neighbor was very enthusiastic and often shared some ingredients he had prepared with me, so I felt too embarrassed to refuse and agreed to go along. This school had quite a few international students from various countries. When we arrived at the school, it was very lively inside. They were dressed in fashionable clothes, lighting a bonfire, singing and dancing. Watching the firelight dance, their faces shone with youthful beauty, and a small smile appeared on my face too. At that moment, I felt emotional about having been reborn and was grateful to be starting a different life. I would no longer give everything for people who aren't worth it. Suddenly, someone called out. I was pulled back from my thoughts and looked in that direction. In the crowd, a particularly striking, beautiful Eastern-looking girl was being fawned over by a group of people. Many of the men present wanted to invite her to dance or join in their games. But the girl looked indifferent. Her white dress made her skin look pale and lovely, and she carried herself with an air of haughty elegance. I had no intention of making contact with someone so conspicuous and was about to move to the edge of the crowd when the girl suddenly hurried in my direction. Before I could react, she was already at my side. Her expression darkened and her brows tightened slightly. Not going to say hello? How rude of you. Because of her action, the gazes of most people around shifted over. In an instant, I felt like a monkey being stared at in the zoo, and the girl's words left me completely stunned. I stared at her in a daze. Could this person possibly know me? My brain spun wildly as I tried desperately to pull this face from memory, but I failed. If I really knew such a pretty girl, there's no reason I would forget her. Not even a similar facial shape could be found. I could only say cautiously, "May I ask who you are?" The girl's lips twitched into a faint, slightly mocking curve. She did not answer my question. She merely tilted her head slightly and asked coolly, "What are you doing here? Did your biased parents kick you out and send you? Are you really letting Leo take over your nest?" Hearing that, alarm bells rang in my mind. Anyone who knew about my background like that definitely didn't come from an ordinary family. I frowned sharply, about to demand loudly who she was. Could the Johnsons have told her something and sent her find me? Seeing me so guarded, the girl hadn't said anything yet, but people around started to complain about me unhappily, thinking I was ungentlemanly. How could I treat such a beautiful woman that way? After hearing that, I couldn't help rolling my eyes. Were they all a bunch of brainless people? The girl, however, sighed with a very pleasant expression. She pushed the only bottle of drink she had into my hand. She said softly, "After attending your birthday party, my parents and I emigrated. Did you like the gift I gave you?" Her voice was like a lonely, clear spring, inexplicably calming the restless heart. I was a bit stunned and subconsciously asked, "What gift?" She frowned and said discontentedly, "I scolded you. The sapphire brooch I bought for you for thousands. It should have been your most expensive gift on your birthday. And you actually forgot." I do remember the sapphire brooch. Leo couldn't bear to part with it and wore it on his chest every day to show off. If later he hadn't been ambushed and beaten up in a back alley by some money-grubbing people for showing off too much, he probably would have kept wearing it. I tightened my hand around the drink bottle, swallowed, and asked in disbelief, "That was given to me?" Of course. Otherwise, was it for that cuckoo who took someone else's nest, that spotted dove? At the mention of Leo, the girl's pretty face puckered slightly, and she immediately made a somewhat disdainful expression. Still oddly cute, the corner of my mouth couldn't help lifting. When receiving the gifts, Leo said they were all for him. No one paid attention to me. It turns out someone does care about me sincerely. At that moment, a warm current brushed through my heart. Then the girl opened her mouth and began speaking, her words full of various grievances about Leo. Watching her roast Leo, I suddenly found it somewhat amusing. It turns out that even the coolest goddess becomes a chatterbox when she's complaining about someone. She said with a face full of disgust, "When our parents arranged the marriage, there was actually supposed to be a place for me. But that Leo has been putting on airs since he was a child. A boy who constantly plays the victim. It's disgusting. I told my parents from the start that there was no way it would work and turned down that engagement. Just thinking that later I'll have to compete with Chloe and let Leo choose. I might as well be killed." After she finished speaking, she even stuck out her tongue. Seeing her like that, I couldn't help but burst out laughing. Those scenes she described played through my mind on their own, and they really were pretty funny. Perhaps realizing she had been a bit out of line, the girl's words faded, and she looked at me again, saying casually, "You're much better than that, Leo. You look so much better when you smile. Why be so glum all the time?" I felt a little moved, couldn't help reaching out my hand, and introduced myself. My name is Ethan. What's yours? Let's get to know each other. She widened her eyes. So you really don't remember my name? Sophia Taylor. Got it? Also, on your 19th birthday, when I tried to find you, I saw you sitting alone staring at your watch, ignoring me, the cold shoulder. As she spoke, she pouted in annoyance, as if I were some heartless cat. I awkwardly tugged at the corner of my mouth and, realizing the situation, hurriedly apologized. It won't happen again. Yes, I was previously bewitched, wholeheartedly devoted to Chloe. At that time, no one else even existed in my eyes. Everything about me, body and heart, revolved around Chloe, including Leo beating someone and Chloe begging me desperately to take the blame and turn myself in at the police station. I couldn't bear to see her cry, so I gritted my teeth and agreed, was detained at the police station for 7 days, and also had to pay about $10,000 in compensation. That money was all money I had earned through hard part-time work. At that time, besides living at the Johnsons', I actually didn't dare use any of the Johnsons' extra money, for fear my parents would think I was a freeloader and believed I was just after their money. But all that I did failed to earn them even the slightest regard. Instead, it only hurt me all the more. Later, when my parents saw my leg burned, scarred, and made limp, they never once mentioned treating it. After they died, my parents preferred to donate the Johnson family's money in the name of the late Leo rather than leave me even a single cent. Fortunately, heaven gave me a chance to be reborn, allowing me to choose again. This time, whether it's choosing people or a life, I will not make the wrong choice again. Sophia was pleased with my attitude. The corners of her mouth lifted as she snorted. This is more like it. Come with me for a late-night bite later. I thought about the favor she'd done me by giving me that brooch, even if the brooch had never been mine for a moment. But I still felt I ought to thank her, even if it was just by taking her out to dinner. With that in mind, I nodded in agreement. After that, Sophia stayed with me the whole time. Many people around were envious. Even when someone approached her to strike up a conversation, Sophia lifted her chin coolly and didn't so much as glance at them. Those people returned empty-handed, forced to cast their jealous gazes on me. I shook my head helplessly. 2 hours later, as the bonfire party gradually dispersed, Sophia took me to an outdoor barbecue stall. When we ordered the kebabs, the owner smiled and asked, "Sophia, this is the first time I've seen you bring someone over. Is this your boyfriend?" My cheeks flushed slightly. I was about to wave my hand and say no. Sophia preceded me and smiled. "Not yet, but I'm pursuing him, so it will be soon." The confidence on her face, along with her grace and nobility, made one unconsciously attracted to her. But because of that sentence, my heart suddenly missed a beat. When we were eating barbecue, I originally had little appetite, but seeing her enjoy her food, I followed suit and still ate quite a few skewers. By the time we were nearly finished eating, Sophia said triumphantly, "Not bad, right? I've been coming here to eat for many years." I nodded noncommittally. "It's really good." The smile on Sophia's face grew even brighter. Under the scattered stars, her eyes seemed filled with them too, especially beautiful. A few minutes later, she spoke again. "I was serious about what I just said. You can think it over." I looked up at her, completely baffled. She seemed not to expect that reaction from me, so she gave me a mock-angry glare before continuing. "The question the barbecue stall owner asked just now?" I said I was serious. "Anyway, you're single now. I'm single too, and we almost had an engagement before. Why not give it a try?" When she finished saying that, her expression toward me carried a hint of caution, but it vanished in an instant. I shook my head, thinking I must have been mistaken. Such an outstanding girl with status and background couldn't possibly have shown me that look. I stopped what I was doing, looked in her eyes, and replied seriously. "First, I'm very grateful for Miss Sophia's favor, but I really have only just come out of my previous relationship not long ago, and for the time being, I can't start a new romance." When I finished speaking, her expression visibly fell. For some reason, I didn't want to see that look on her face, and since she was the only one who'd given me such an expensive gift, I smiled and said, "But we can start as friends." At her words, her dim eyes brightened again, looking especially beautiful. She tilted her head, and a happy smile appeared on her face. "From now on, don't call me Miss Sophia. Just call me Sophia." "Yes, ma'am," I hurriedly agreed. In the blink of an eye, it had been 3 years since I came to Northern Europe. Over those 3 years, Sophia and I agreed to visit many places together, and we came to know each other much better. Her values and interests were much like mine. She was an upbeat, very interesting person. Through day after day of being together, I was moved by her in so many ways and eventually fell for her. We became a couple. Actually, being with her was really joyful and never emotionally draining. She not only constantly showered me with praise, she took me snorkeling in the Maldives to see the aurora in the Arctic, and we even rode a hot air balloon in Turkey. These experiences are things I never went through in my past life. Back then, even when I begged Chloe to accompany me on a honeymoon to a nearby city, she flat out refused with the words, "No time." In the latter half of my previous life, every time I remembered this, it made me a little sad. Chloe and I didn't just miss out on a honeymoon. We didn't even have a single photo together, only that one wedding portrait. And now Sophia's and my phones are full of photos of the two of us. She still pulls me along to do all kinds of poses with her. She also, whenever I unconsciously become serious, pinches my face into pouty lips and takes photo after photo as keepsakes. Deep in my heart, I feel a sincere gratitude toward her. I also wanted to treat her well, just as she treated me. She and I started another company together, and because of the foresight I had from my past life, the company quickly became a dark horse in the industry, frequently appearing on major financial headlines. There were even news agencies that wanted to interview us. I don't really like going on TV. Whenever that happens, I let Sophia go. She didn't refuse and gladly agreed. Our company went public later and came to occupy the majority of the Nordic market. Even during busy work periods, the two of us would still carve out time to go on dates and enjoy life together. Just a few days ago, Sophia and I mutually decided to get married. Although we had already discussed marriage, she still gave me an unforgettable proposal ceremony. At that moment, I asked her with red in the eyes why she had stolen my chance to propose. Actually, I had been secretly preparing a proposal too. I hadn't expected her to propose first. Smiling, she linked her arm through mine and said, "I want my man to be the happiest man in the world. And to me, it doesn't matter who proposes to whom. What matters is that we hold each other in our hearts." I couldn't help but pull her into my arms. In that moment, I silently made a vow to myself. As long as she remains true to me, I will never fail her. My parents-in-law were still sentimental people. Knowing we were getting married, they asked us to return to the country to register the marriage, hold a wedding banquet there, and pay respects to our ancestors. Although I didn't want to go back, I had no reason to refuse. A month later, I boarded the Taylor family's private plane with Sophia and my parents-in-law, heading back to the country. When I stepped off the plane and looked at the familiar blue sky and the surrounding familiar environment, my heart was unnervingly calm. But Sophia beside me was still unsettled. She clasped my hand tightly with her fingers intertwined with mine, as if giving me strength. I shook my head at her and mouthed back, "Don't worry, I'm fine." "That's good." She mouthed back to me as well, then led me out of the terminal. My parents-in-law followed behind us. That night, we were staying in a 7-star hotel. In front of the huge floor-to-ceiling windows, the entire night view of Jing City was spread out before us. Before, I had never realized the night view of Jing City was so beautiful. I must have been watching too intently. It wasn't until Sophia stepped up and wrapped her arms around my waist from behind that I realized she had come to stand before me. I turned, drew her into my embrace, and together we admired the bustling night skyline. And to officially announce the marriage, the Taylors had rented the entire 7-star hotel, with all the on-site decorations personally arranged by Sophia. My father and mother-in-law also invited every celebrity in the circle. Before sending the invitations, Sophia first showed me the list and asked if I wanted to remove the Johnsons and the Taylors. I shook my head, Over the past 3 years, I had already come to many realizations. Besides, on this trip home, I knew I would inevitably see them again. There was no need to hide. I hadn't done anything shameful or illegal, nor had I wronged them in any way. And as for me now, I already know that loving yourself is the most important thing. On the day of the banquet, the weather was calm and sunny. At the banquet venue, the crowd was even more bustling. Everyone was dressed splendidly, clinking glasses and making rounds. I'm not very good at handling big events, so I took a glass of champagne and went straight to a corner to hide and keep to myself. Suddenly, she heard someone gossiping beside her. Chloe is still hung up on that white moonlight. I heard her assistant accidentally dirted her white moonlight's clothes a couple days ago, and she immediately blacklisted the assistant from the entire industry. And that assistant had worked for her for 3 years. Another added, "That's right." I also heard that once her family's maid spoke ill of that white moonlight and was immediately fired and driven out of the capital, truly a rage that would unbind a crown for a beauty. Hearing that, I couldn't help but reply, "Now, you could almost call him an unrequited first love. After all, he really did look pitiful. If I didn't know about all the dirty things he'd done, I wouldn't hesitate to believe someone would like him." But unexpectedly, as soon as I finished speaking, everyone turned to look at me with the same disdainful, alien-eyed expression. "Did you just get to town? What Leo? Chloe's white moon is Ethan." At that moment, I was completely stunned. Instinctively, I replied, "How could this be? Leo and Chloe are both married." Of course, on the second day after I left, it was their wedding. Since a previous life, Chloe had been longing for Leo. When she was reborn, she naturally intended to renew their past romance. It's just that before I finished speaking, everyone looked at me as if I were mentally challenged. At the wedding, Chloe ran away. Leo became a joke. You don't even know that? How long has it been since you were last back in the country? Run away from an arranged marriage? I could hardly believe my ears. I frowned slightly, genuine confusion showing in my eyes. I hadn't even had a chance to understand what they meant when someone suddenly exclaimed, brother, you look kind of familiar, kind of like Ethan." Now I'm wearing a fully tailored outfit. Because Sophia has taken very good care of me, the function looks handsome, much better than before. So they belatedly became aware of it. Someone scoffed, "You're here to suck up to Chloe too? You look pretty good. If you really win her over, don't forget to send your buddy a red envelope." They chattered away, quickly coming from all directions to surround me. I wanted to leave, but couldn't, and I wasn't used to dealing with such a scene, so I could only knit my brows even tighter. Just then, someone pulled Leo over, shouting, "Leo, come here quickly. Look, doesn't this look like your brother?" Leo had been looking impatient, but when he saw me, his face changed drastically, flushing pale and then sallow. Then suddenly he clenched his fists tight, a flash of hatred in his eyes, as if he wanted nothing more than to squeeze the life out of me. He immediately shook the man's hand off and barked at me in a rough voice. Like what? Every kind of monster and demon is pretending to be my brother, and drove him out of the house. Everyone was stunned. You should know that his public persona has always been like a breath of spring, never getting into conflicts with others. Unexpectedly, at this moment, he actually lost his composure. Although he was still dressed entirely in bespoke clothing, compared to me now, he looked somewhat petty and unimpressive. I turned my wrist. The watch Sophia had spent over $100 million to buy for me at an auction not long ago sat on it, steady as a rock, and she said, "Leo, I'm a guest at today's banquet. What right do you have to kick me out?" His eyes went wide. He grabbed a champagne from a nearby drinking table and splashed a whole glass of it straight into my face. I was unprepared. When I tried to dodge, half my shoulders still got soaked. He looked at me coldly and said menacingly, "You fake, get out now, or if Chloe sees you, she'll make your life miserable." I looked at my soiled suit, my expression severe, my tone icy. "You dirted my suit. You must compensate me." Leo snorted, casually pulled a card from his wallet, and tossed it in front of me. "There's $100,000 in this card. Take it and get out. Don't ever let me see you again." His arrogant, Overbearing manner really makes you want to kick him away with one foot. I took a deep breath, not wanting the official announcement party for Sophia and me to turn ugly, and turned to leave. Behind me, suddenly Chloe's voice was heard. Does it really look that much like it? Even though we hadn't seen each other in 3 years, when I heard that voice, I couldn't help but stop in my tracks. Then someone behind him flattered again. It really looks like it. Leo's voice sounded immediately after. What are they doing? Always making a scene. I saw that person. The guy who deliberately imitates my brother's plastic surgery. I've seen plenty of those. My brother's been dead for so many years. How can people still profit off him? We'll light a few more eternal lamps for him. I sneered. No wonder Leo was rushing me to leave. It turned out he was afraid I'd show up and cause a scene in front of Chloe. But he was clearly overthinking. I couldn't care less about Chloe anymore. I only care about the people I should care about. I was just about to lift my foot and leave when I suddenly heard an older-sounding woman's voice, choked with sobs. Leo, I shouldn't have bought that plane ticket for your brother back then. He suffered so much, and I haven't made it up to him. And then it was my mom. My father seemed to hold her in his arms to comfort her, letting out a long sigh. It's my fault. I shouldn't have been so hard on Ethan. Facing their confessions, I felt nothing at all. Just as I reached the door, I ran into Sophia, who was coming in. She wore a pure white gown that, though less ornate than the others, made her seem all the more noble. Her arrival quickly became the center of attention. The noisy crowd in the banquet hall fell silent, instinctively turning to look toward the entrance. I was facing away from the banquet hall and didn't notice the scene at all. I only felt that the moment I saw Sophia, a sudden sense of relief washed over me, and the grievances I'd been suppressing surged up. I couldn't help but shout at her. Wife! Sophia, who had been smiling, lost her smile when she saw the wine stain on my shoulder. Her beautiful eyes hardened. Who bullied you? She ground her teeth in anger, stepped forward and grabbed my hand. I'll take you to the dressing room to freshen up. After speaking, she ignored the onlookers, grabbed my hand, and headed toward the dressing room. Someone behind her asked in, This is the eldest daughter of the top wealthy Taylor family. I thought Chloe was already at beauty level, but I didn't expect Miss Sophia's appearance to make the whole room go dim, with everyone drawn to her. The voices behind me grew smaller and smaller until they vanished at my ears. I instinctively glanced sideways at Sophia and saw that her expression wasn't good at all. When they reached the dressing room, she immediately called the person in charge. Bring out the suit I kept in reserve for my husband. She always had a double backup for everything she did, just in case some unexpected change occurred at the last minute. So her carefulness gave me a strong sense of security. The person in charge went to fetch a suit, and Sophia came back in front of me, taking my hand, her tone returning to gentle. I'll change you into some clothes, and later I'll make sure they pay. Okay. I nodded slightly under her tender gaze. After quickly changing into the suit, she asked again who had bullied me, and I told her. It was Leo. He deliberately splashed me. Sophia's pretty face was full of irritation. That annoying pest is still alive? It's time to ruin the Johnson group. Ever since we got together, I haven't kept anything from her. After she learned about my past entanglement with the Johnson group, she flew into a rage and wanted to return home immediately to confront them on my behalf. I was the one who stopped her, saying I didn't want to keep dwelling on the past and wanted to look forward, and only then did she relent. But this time, Leo really angered me. If people don't offend me, I won't offend them. If someone offends me, I will cut the grass and root it out. Very soon, the suit was brought over. Sophia looked at me in the jeweled suit I had changed into, and she knitted her brows slightly. The next moment, she lifted her brows and eyes, leaving behind a line. Honey, you go wait for me in the banquet hall first. I'll go change into another outfit, otherwise there won't be any couple vibe. Hearing her words, I couldn't help but laugh aloud. But knowing she probably wanted to surprise me, I stepped out of the dressing room first, though I didn't go straight into the ballroom. Instead, I waited until the whole hotel's lights dimmed and only the stage was bathed in spotlights. Then I slowly walked in from the back of the crowd and around to the front row. Perhaps sensing that the host was about to appear, everyone in the ballroom instinctively fell silent, their gazes fixed intently on the stage. Just then, Sophia, wearing a haute couture gown, slowly walked onto the stage. The sequins on her dress sparkled. Her graceful, swaying figure caused many in the audience to show expressions of astonished admiration. A flash of amazement even crossed my eyes. That dress, paired with the new suit I had just changed into, truly looked like a matching couple's outfit. I looked at her with soft eyes, while a few middle-aged women's compliments reached my ears. The daughter of the Taylor family is actually this beautiful. I used to think she wasn't as pretty as that Taylor girl, but going abroad for a few years really makes a difference. She clearly looks younger and more stylish. I heard she's highly educated and even started her own listed company. Truly impressive. I wonder who will be lucky enough to become her future husband and host today's engagement banquet with her. Listening to their words, I smoothed my expression and curled my lips slightly. On stage, Sophia gracefully accepted the praise, and then, before anyone could react, she reached out toward the audience and said, "Thank you all for coming to my and my lover's engagement party. Now, please welcome my love, Ethan." The moment the name Ethan was spoken, Chloe, who had been listlessly drinking in the audience, suddenly turned her head and looked up at the stage. Others' voices grew louder with speculation. "Ethan is dead, isn't he? What's going on here?" I had thought about changing my name, but the paperwork is too troublesome, and I'd have to return to my home country to complete a series of procedures. In the end, I gave up the idea of changing my name. After all, a name is nothing more than a code to me. Sophia's slender fingers were still suspended in the air. I couldn't bear for her to keep holding that pose. I hurried up onto the stage, took Sophia's hand firmly, and interlaced my fingers with hers, and my whole face was instantly exposed under the lights. Everyone drew a sharp breath, as if they hadn't expected me to still be alive. I smiled slightly, then bent down a little and kissed Sophia on the forehead. In the audience, there was a brief hesitation of a few seconds, then thunderous applause. The sound that followed was Chloe crushing a wine glass. She didn't care that her hand was cut by the glass shards. With no regard for decorum, she grabbed her skirt and ran onto the stage. She reached out with her other hand to grab my wrist and cried out, "Ethan, it's really you're still alive." Those who didn't know what had happened between Chloe and me looked at her on the stage in surprise. Tears welled in the woman's eyes. She looked excited. When she ran onto the stage and said those words, it was obvious there was a story between her and me. My parents couldn't restrain themselves either. They all rushed onto the stage and asked me cautiously, "Ethan, you're back?" They both looked a decade or more older, especially my mother, only in her 50s but with completely white hair. Behind them, Leo followed silently, his gaze dark and murderous, as if he wanted to devour me. Looking at them, I felt nothing stir inside. I said calmly, "It's me. I didn't die. That day, I went to Northern Europe." One sentence made them breathe a sigh of relief. People in the audience realized it belatedly and said, "This person really is Ethan. I remember that kid as timid and shrinking, not at all imposing. How is he now? 30 years on the east bank of the river, 30 years on the west bank. If I'd known earlier, I would have married my daughter to him. Look how handsome this young man is." My mother asked tearfully, "Ethan, you're not dead. Why didn't you come back to find your mother? Do you know how much your father and I miss you?" Chloe just stared at me dazedly, not daring to blink. I curled the corner of my mouth, no smile in my eyes. "What is there to apologize for, Mrs. Johnson? We already signed the papers severing our parent-child relationship long ago. You made me sign them, didn't you?" Mrs. Johnson was immediately left speechless. Sophia, sensing I was in a bad mood, tightened the fingers of the hand she had intertwined with mine, giving me strength. She stepped forward and defended me. "Mrs. Johnson, as far as I know, you have treated that imposter Leo far better than Ethan, by a long shot. You know perfectly well how you've bullied him, We're all people in this circle. I'm honestly embarrassed to say it. Her words were ambiguous, but my parents both went pale. Chloe clenched her fists, her voice trembling slightly. Ethan, if you're afraid of your parents, why didn't you contact me? Didn't we agree on 3 months? Seeing the rival speak, Sophia suddenly squeezed my hand harder. Sophia forced a smile. Chloe, you were about to marry Leo. Why are you still pining over another man? Aren't you afraid your husband will get jealous? And there's one more thing. She deliberately displayed our interlaced fingers. On her ring finger, a pair of diamond wedding bands flashed brilliantly in the light. I get very jealous. Don't casually talk to my husband, or else, watch out. I might just bankrupt your tailor group. Chloe stiffened all over, her gaze slowly dropping to the hand Sophia and I were holding. She belatedly realized that this was the wedding and engagement banquet for Sophia and me. Then that always gentle, placid face shattered. She rushed over like a madwoman, trying to tear Sophia and me apart. Ethan, you're lying. You said you'd love only me for your whole life. How could you marry someone else? I know you're doing this despite me. You succeeded. Let go now. Watching her hysterical behavior, I found it amusing. Chloe, I did it. In my last life, I truly loved you for a lifetime. My voice was light, yet it entered Chloe's ears with perfect clarity. She trembled all over. I tore my hand away from hers, my expression cold, and said solemnly, Miss Chloe, please don't go crazy. Today is the engagement banquet for me and my beloved. Saying that, I looked at my parents and made a beckoning gesture. Their faces flushed pale, then dark, still somewhat unwilling as they stepped down from the stage. Just then, my father-in-law's sonorous voice slowly came up from below the stage. I didn't really want to meddle in young people's affairs. I wanted Sophia and Ethan to handle the engagement banquet themselves. Or are the Johnsons and the Taylors planning to make a scene? When he finished speaking, everyone realized that the head of the Taylor family had also arrived at the scene. The mother-in-law followed behind the father-in-law up onto the stage. She stood beside Sophia, while the father-in-law stood beside me. This time, it was the mother-in-law who spoke. We've long heard about the way Ethan is treated at the Johnsons. Since the Johnsons won't regard him as their son, from now on he'll be a member of our Taylor family, our son-in-law. If the 3 of you still refuse to step down, don't blame us if we start ordering the bodyguards to eject you. The mother-in-law's remarks were no less impressive than the father-in-law's. If anything, she carried the bearing of a top-tier matriarch. And as their only daughter, Sophia had indeed inherited that powerful presence from her mother. My parents are still people who care about face. This time they couldn't hold their ground and left the stage without a word. But once off the stage, they both stared at me intently. Chloe kept looking back as she walked down the stage. Her eyes were rimmed with tears, appearing on the verge of breaking down. If it were before, seeing her like this would have made my heart ache. But now I calmly turned my gaze away. Just as Leo was dawdling behind Chloe, about to step off the stage, a cool female voice suddenly rang out. Stop! I followed the voice and saw Sophia offer me a reassuring smile. But when her eyes fell on Leo again, there was an icy chill in them. I suddenly realized why she called out to Leo. It turned out she still hadn't forgotten that Leo had soaked my suit. Leo and everyone present were momentarily baffled. Even my father and mother-in-law looked at Sophia in surprise. In just a few seconds, Leo suddenly concocted a possibility in his mind. Could it be that the eldest Miss Taylor has taken a liking to him? Thinking of this, he reverted to his usual demeanor, speaking softly and meekly. Miss Sophia, what's wrong? Did I do something to upset you? Sophia frowned, a flash of disgust passing through her eyes, and she said coldly, Don't try to cozy up to me here. Half an hour ago, you were the one who threw wine on Ethan, weren't you? Now apologize to him. Leo was taken aback. He never expected her to be standing up for him. When his father and mother-in-law heard this, they immediately grew stern, their gazes turning coldly toward Leo. Everyone's eyes fell on Leo. For a moment, Leo felt extremely humiliated. This was the first time he had been so humiliated since Chloe ran off from her wedding. His eyes grew red, and his hands hanging at his sides clenched tightly into fists. He had no intention of apologizing to me. Why should he apologize to me? He was the Johnson family's young master who should have been held aloft, not someone like me who grew up in a garbage heap and had seized everything from him. At that thought, he looked at me with hatred. I felt no fear at all. I met his gaze calmly. 3 years ago, he was feted by all, everyone gathered around him. 3 years later today, who is left by his side? At this moment, my parents also looked at Leo in shock, and Chloe's dark eyes were streaked with anger. Seeing Leo unwilling to come over and apologize, Sophia, who was usually patient and composed, let go of my hand and hurried forward, delivering a kick to the back of Leo's knee. The next second, Leo let out a miserable cry as his knee went weak and he dropped to one knee on the ground. He refused to accept the humiliation and was about to get up when Sophia's voice came crashing down from above. Since you're unwilling to apologize voluntarily, someone, make him kneel and apologize to Ethan. Soon 2 bodyguards stepped forward and, like dragging a dead dog, forcibly pulled Leo to me, making him kneel and apologize. Leo choked and cried out. I thought my brother was also trying to scam them, trying to squeeze into the Johnson's house, so I splashed him with wine to drive him away. Anyone who didn't know him would definitely have believed his words. Sure enough, quite a few guests in the audience began to speak up for him. The young master meant no harm. My parents' eyes flickered with hesitation, but for a moment, their gaze returned to me. There was a dimness in Chloe's eyes. I couldn't tell what she was thinking. How they felt didn't matter to me. I only cared about how Sophia felt. If she felt the same as them, I would not hesitate to turn and walk away. Sophia seemed to notice the change in my emotions. She turned back and returned to my side. Grasping my hand, she slipped her fingers between mine and interlaced our hands. Then, looking down at Leo, who was still making excuses, she snorted in derision. Still being stubborn? Show me the surveillance footage. Before long, the video of Leo splashing my drink was played publicly on the big screen, and the words he said were heard by everyone, not a single one left out. For a moment, everyone's expression toward Leo changed. My parents' eyes were stained with anger. On the surface, everyone treated me like this. So how did he treat me in private? When they thought of this possibility, their bodies shook violently. Chloe stared at Leo with all her might. She never expected that the man behind him would be like this. Luckily, she didn't marry him 3 years ago. Luckily, at that time, she realized she had fallen in love with me. At this moment, she felt extremely relieved. Sophia smiled and said, "Are you willing to apologize now?" Leo felt as if he had been completely stripped naked. He wished he could find a crack in the ground to crawl into, but there was nowhere to hide. Out of the corner of his eye, he suddenly noticed a ventilation grate not far away. He could run away. Thinking of this, he immediately struggled to get up. Seeing him like that, Sophia guessed what he was probably thinking and issued a cold, harsh order. Then slap him in the face, slap him until he's willing to apologize. Yes, Mississippi. At the bodyguard's words, one of them immediately slapped toward Leo's face. For a moment, the entire hall resounded with Leo's screams. Sophia was entirely unfazed. She tilted her head slightly to look at her father-in-law and asked seriously, "Dad, you don't blame me for making a scene, do you?" My father-in-law let out a light laugh. "This is truly a daughter of our Taylor family." As he spoke, he put his hand on my shoulder and said kindly, "Ethan, don't worry. From now on, no one will dare bully you again. Our Taylor family isn't something any Tom, Dick, or Harry can bully." What he said appeared directed at me, but in fact was meant for everyone. After being slapped 10 times in a row, Leo couldn't hold on any longer. Breathing heavily, he spoke. Only then did the bodyguard stop. Leo's face was already swollen high, looking like a pig's head. He stumbled and fell to his knees, tears streaming as he said to me, "I'm sorry, bro, sab." When he finished speaking, he burst into tears. I couldn't tell whether his cheeks hurt too much or he was overwhelmed by the humiliation. I looked at him coldly and didn't respond. My father-in-law waved his hand and had someone drag Leo out the main door. Actually, Leo being publicly beaten today and forced to kneel and apologize was already a slap in the face to the Johnson family. But my parents stubbornly dared not show any displeasure. After all, Leo was indeed at fault first, and besides, in their minds I had come back alive, so they barely had any attention left for Leo. Leo was quickly dragged out the gate. The entire hall remained silent. My father-in-law cleared his throat lightly and, easing the atmosphere, said to everyone, "Thank you all for coming to my daughter's and son-in-law's engagement banquet today. The engagement banquet is now officially underway." At his words, the crowd finally became noisy again. It was as if that scene had never happened. My father-in-law then led my mother-in-law off the stage, leaving the stage to Sophia and me. At that moment, Sophia suddenly leaned toward me and said softly, "Will you dance with me?" I was startled for a moment, then gladly wrapped my arms around her waist and leapt with her across the stage. In my previous life, I couldn't dance at all. After being reborn, I learned it from Sophia. Because during the 3 years we were dating, she always liked to pull me into the house and teach me all kinds of partner dances. When our dance ended, the entire audience erupted into thunderous applause. In the audience, Chloe watched the scene, biting her lip hard, a single tear falling silently. She was afraid that if she loosened her teeth, she would cry out loud. During the banquet intermission, many people came up to offer toasts, but Sophia turned them all away, saying that she and I were preparing for pregnancy and shouldn't drink. My cheeks were slightly flushed as I looked at her with some surprise. She secretly stuck her tongue out at me and whispered, "Aren't you fond of children? Once we're married, we'll have them." I couldn't stop my eyes from getting wet. Today, she and my parents-in-law moved me so much. With her by my side, I felt very safe. After we finished greeting the people who had gathered around, Sophia's phone rang and she went aside to take the call. I wanted to find a quiet spot, so I took a dessert and headed to the pool. I had just sat down and hadn't taken a bite when a woman's sobbing voice came through. "You've always loved spicy food, haven't you? Why are you changing your taste now?" The hand holding my spoon paused. I looked up and saw Chloe standing not far from me, her eyes red as if she'd been crying. I didn't answer her. I scooped a spoonful of dessert and stuffed it into my mouth. The cloying sweetness instantly assaulted my taste buds. I smiled with satisfaction, narrowing my eyes. Chloe, however, seemed to remember something and widened her eyes in disbelief. "So you don't actually like spicy food? You've only been making all those spicy dishes because I like them?" Thinking of that possibility, she clutched her mouth tightly with one hand, tears falling in big pearls like beads that had snapped from string. I've never liked spicy food since I was a child, and I can't handle it. But in my previous life, because she loved it, I forced myself to try it. Even when it later gave me mixed hemorrhoids and the pain had me rolling in bed, I still didn't dare say I wouldn't eat it. After all, that was the only thing she and I had in common, and only at mealtimes would she give me even the slightest look. But after being reborn, I only follow my own heart and eat what I love. Actually, Sophia also likes spicy food. Even when I later tried to eat with her, she took the chopsticks out of my hand and told me, "Ethan, you don't need to deliberately cater to me to show your love. That's not the right kind of love. Just be your most authentic self." After that, every meal had half the dishes she liked and half the dishes I liked. Even the first time I went to my in-laws' house, when we ate fruit, my father and mother-in-law first asked about my taste. Only once, and they remember my preferences. From then on, whenever they came, there was always a portion of what I loved to eat. Thinking of those lovely memories, I couldn't help but curl my lips. Chloe was stunned for a moment. Actually, after not seeing me for 3 years, she thought I had become a lot more handsome. Now, she made me feel like someone I could never hope to reach. A few minutes later, thinking of what she'd heard in the banquet hall, she stammered out, "Are you really going to have a child with Sophia?" "Ethan, I can have a child too. Do you still remember all our memories from our past life?" Could you really bear to forget these things? No, I don't believe it. You still have me in your heart. You definitely still have me. She said that and rushed forward, trying to grab my hand. I instinctively slid over a bit to the side, avoiding her outstretched hand. Because Chloe lunged too fast, she missed the seat and slammed her jaw on the chair. Her chin was split open, a trickle of blood flowing out. But she seemed not to feel the pain. Her beautiful eyes remained fixed on me. She begged meekly, I can't live without you. I'm begging you, give me one more chance. Let's start over properly. This time, we'll have a grand wedding, and then we'll go to the Maldives for our honeymoon. Or, haven't you always wanted to go to the Arctic to see the aurora? We can go see the northern lights there, okay? It turned out she didn't know I wanted to go to the Maldives or the Arctic, but in her past life, she never once mentioned any of this to me, even until she died. My eyes grew colder and colder. I was about to speak when Sophia's voice suddenly came from a distance and drew near. You don't need to go with Ethan. Ethan and I have long since been to those places, and we've been to many places he wanted to go. Sophia hurried forward and came up in front of me. A smile spread across my face as I stood up and looked at her. Finished the call? Yeah. She nodded and reached out her hand toward me. My heart instinctively tightened. Had I done something to offend her? Was she going to slap my face? As I was lost in these wild thoughts, she simply extended a finger and gently brushed the corner of my mouth. Only then did I notice a few crumbs of dessert clinging to her fingers. I felt my face flush awkwardly. Sophia, however, had a smile lightening her eyes. Is the dessert that good? I want a bite too. She said that, took the spoon from my hand, scooped a small bite of dessert, and then, using my hand, ate the dessert. I know she doesn't really like sweets, but sometimes because I eat them, she'll come over and grab a few bites. Whenever that happens, I helplessly let her have some. Chloe next to us clearly can't accept me being affectionate with another woman. A spring breeze brushed her cheek, but she felt chilled to the bone. Sophia and I had no intention of staying any longer. After finishing the last bite of dessert and tossing the paper plate, I took Sophia's hand and prepared to leave. Only, we had barely taken a few steps when behind us Chloe's hoarse voice sounded again. Ethan, I don't believe you've stopped having feelings for me. I instinctively stopped, turned around, and saw that she had somehow moved to the edge of the pool. At that moment, she was standing with her back to the expanse of water, her tear-brimmed face showing a glimmer of hope. You must still have feelings for me. After saying that, she resolutely tilted her head back and let herself fall. I knitted my brows tightly. Chloe couldn't swim at all. In the last life, she nearly drowned, and it was me who, dragging my crippled leg, jumped in to save her. After I pulled her out, my unhealed leg became infected again and nearly had to be amputated. A thin sweat unconsciously broke out on my palm. As expected, Chloe, who had fallen into the pool, began to struggle wildly. She was in the water, still loudly crying out my name. Those who had come into the banquet hall all looked toward me. Some had a hint of anticipation in their eyes, as if watching a show. Sophia beside me shook my hand and, seeming quite casual, asked, "Not going to save her?" But as she said this, a flash of danger crossed her eyes, as if I actually chose to save her, she would cut me off immediately. Seeing more and more people gathering by the pool, I shook my head. Let's go. I grabbed her hand and strode forward. Behind us, Chloe was still struggling in the water, screaming at me in a piercing voice. Then there was a splash. Someone had jumped into the water. Only when I pulled Sophia farther and farther away did those sounds fall behind us. Sophia's lips curved slightly. She asked curiously, "Since you didn't save her, why were your palms sweaty? Were you feeling sorry for her?" I let out a light laugh and replied to her, "My dear wife, how could I possibly feel sorry for another woman? I only felt that way because I remembered that when I saved the woman who fell into the water earlier, I nearly died, so—" I hadn't finished explaining when she put her index finger to my lips. Her eyes were a little moist. "Ethan, from now on, no matter what happens, I want you to make sure you stay safe first, even if the person involved is me. Promise me, okay?" I was startled, And then my calm heart began to pound violently. If a wife is like this, what more could a husband ask for? When a banquet ended, I felt both happy and utterly exhausted. As expected, I'm still not good at taking part in these large social gatherings. A week later, Sophia and I had finished paying respects to our ancestors and were preparing to return in Northern Europe. At that time, my wife's parents had landed there 3 days before us. Because we were worried about the elders' health, we gave them the private plane. Sophia and I chose to fly with an international airline. And since that day, Chloe never came to see me again, including my parents, who tried to come find me, but were stopped outside by the bodyguards. That day, Sophia and I were holding hands as we arrived at the terminal, ready to have our tickets checked and board the plane. At that moment, through the noisy crowd, someone came stumbling and running in my direction. On the way, he even knocked into and sent several people flying. The other person quickly ran up to me. A cold glint flashed before my eyes, and only then did I notice that the newcomer was holding a fruit knife. And it turned out to be Leo. His once handsome face was now twisted by jealousy. He roared harshly, "Ethan, it would have been better if you were dead. Why did you have to come back? When you died before, Chloe and I called off our engagement, making me a laughingstock. Mom and Dad stopped doting on me and kept talking about you. I endured it all. But now that you're back, Mom and Dad say they're going to leave the entire company inheritance to you. What about me? What am I supposed to do? Only if you die do I have a chance to live." Suddenly, the terminal erupted into chaos. Someone shouted at Leo to stop, but not a single person dared to step forward. Sophia, whose face suddenly changed beside me, was about to pull me back and use her body to block the knife Leo was stabbing with. I felt a chill in my heart, quickly caught Leo's knife hand with mine, and said to her, "Don't come over, just call the police." But a scream sounded in my ear. "Ethan!" It was Chloe. She had actually come. My dad and Mom came running up right behind her, out of breath. My dad's authoritative voice rang out. "Leo, what are you doing? Why are you hurting your brother?" Leo trembled all over. He snatched his wrist back from my hand, and just as I was about to swing a fist at him, he was quicker and pressed a knife to my throat. I was forced to raise both hands, staring at him with eyes as cold as ice. He instead pressed a knife to my throat, turned around, and, holding me hostage, said to my father, "Dad, I'm the son you raised with your own hands. Is blood really worth so little? Why should he get so much of the inheritance? Give me all the money of Johnson Group right now, or I'll kill him." My father's look at him was full of disappointment and heartache. "Someone told me before that you only care about money and have no sense of compassion. I didn't believe it then, but I never expected." He cut in abruptly. "Cut the crap, you old bastard. Transfer the money now." Chloe stepped closer and said to him, "I can take Ethan's place as your hostage. I'm an only child. You can have all of Taylor Group's assets." But Leo just scoffed. "You, Chloe, I only used a few tricks, and you already misunderstand Ethan. Now, playing the gallant lover? I hold him, and you and your parents won't dare refuse me money. If I hold you, who knows what you might do?" Seeing Chloe's poor expression, he was smug, but he didn't notice that several well-trained bodyguards were approaching from behind. The next second, the bodyguards lunged forward and wrested the weapon from his hand. In the end, he was sentenced to at least 10 years in prison for attempted intentional injury. My parents, feeling despondent for failing as parents, left all their assets to me and voluntarily moved into a nursing home to spend the rest of their lives. Chloe donated the entire company to a charity, retreated to the mountains to practice austerities, and began doing 500 prostrations a day, as if praying to return to the past and stay with her lover. The past is like smoke. Sophia and I had a successful wedding in Northern Europe, and not long after she became pregnant and gave birth to a daughter as beautiful as she is. She and I became the model couple in everyone's eyes, raising our daughter together and staying by each other's side for life.